Welcome back. Passengers from other countries landed together with 81 Singaporeans and dependents returning from the Middle East this morning. They were on a Singapore military aircraft from Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. Now, this is the fourth repatriation flight organised by the Foreign Affairs Ministry and the second via an RSAF plane. Sherlyn Seah was at Changi Airport.
A long-awaited journey back home for many of these passengers, with it having been about 2 weeks since the latest conflict in the Middle East began. This time round, around 40 of those on board are Singaporean students studying in the region. And on touchdown, a message from the pilot.
On behalf of the Republic of Singapore Air Force, it's been an honour to bring you back to your family and familiar surroundings. We appreciate your patience and cooperation throughout the flight, and our crew will be available to assist you as we prepare to arrive at the gate. We wish you a smooth and pleasant continuation as you reconnect with your loved ones. To the Singaporeans on board, a warm welcome home.
In the Middle East, I was finishing up my studies, my A-levels, and being with my family. Unfortunately, I'm separated from my mother. She still plans to work there. Some Singaporeans, they plan to stay in the Middle East for work. But I have to start school, and I was unsure whether the airbase would open soon.
I was very scared, and it was more nervous because of the uncertainty of the conditions and the situation and how long it may, cool down. So yeah, I was just scared, and for the safety of the Singaporeans. But thanks to MFA and everyone that was part of the team, really helped us, give us reassurance. Yeah.
Acting Minister in charge of Muslim Affairs, Faisal Ibrahim, was present at the arrival hall to welcome them. He says agencies will engage the students and provide them with support as they navigate disruptions, including counselling when needed.
We hope that these measures will offer some support and reassurance to students and their families during this uncertain time. I want to stress that the situation in the Middle East remains uncertain. This episode is a reminder that circumstances abroad can change very quickly. MFA has advised Singaporeans to defer all travel to the Middle East region due to the security concern and situation and disruptions to flights.
Meanwhile, this flight also carried passengers from several other countries, including Australia, Indonesia and Vietnam. Authorities say Singaporeans were prioritised, with efforts made to ensure that they secured seats before the remaining slots were released to non-Singaporeans.
I'm very grateful again for the opportunity given by the Singapore Consulate Office. It's one thing to provide an evacuation flight for your own citizens, but it's another thing to provide an evacuation flight for citizens of neighboring countries as well.
The only challenge really right now in Saudi Arabia is fairly safe, but the closure of the airspace has really conditioned everyone's life, and so it's great of the Singaporean government to have organized this. So thank you to the SAF and the MOI to put this together. It was really great. It gave a lot of options to other people, even from outside of Singapore, like myself.
With this arrival, Singapore's repatriation efforts for now have concluded. The Foreign Affairs Ministry remains in touch with remaining Singaporeans still in the region, and CNA understands that if necessary, further arrangements may be made as the situation develops.
Close to 300 Singaporeans and their dependents have returned from the Middle East on military aircraft this week. The Singapore Armed Forces supported the repatriation operations from Saudi Arabia, and the Defence Ministry says it will not hesitate to help Singaporeans whenever being called upon.
For this repatriation mission, we prioritised Singaporeans and used the remaining seats to help our friends from overseas countries where they need help. It is important that with a huge sense of relief and encouragement that all our Singaporeans come back home safely, we will continue to serve our Singaporeans wherever we can.
And to share more about the efforts behind coordinating the repatriation flights, we have Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Huang, in the studio here with us. MOS, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Let's talk a bit more about the repatriation efforts. As of today, hundreds of Singaporeans, their dependents, and even foreigners as well, they've landed safely in Singapore. And there's been an outpouring of, very heartwarming messages, a lot of gratitude and appreciation. But take us behind the scenes and walk us through just how much preparation was needed to get these flights back.
Well, Thank you for asking that question. Actually, while the mission statement was a simple one, and that is to bring Singaporeans home quickly, safely, the planning and execution phases were actually quite complex. The repatriation brought back 600 over Singaporeans and their dependents, and they were spread across several countries in the region. And this was actually spread very far apart. The land transfer alone actually took 20 over hours. I know of people who traveled from Amman to Jeddah on the buses arranged by MFA officials, and they traveled over 1,400 kilometers, 26 hours. So it's actually quite a long distance, and along the way, our officers have to plan carefully to make sure that the routes are safe, and also have to keep in close touch with the local authorities to make sure that there are clearances as Singaporeans cross the borders. And for the air portion, we also had to monitor very closely the airports and the airspace closures, and the situation was actually very dynamic. We had to update our plans all the time and keep Singaporeans updated on what's going on. Back home, there was actually a lot of coordination across agencies, MFA, MINDEF, SAF, MOT, CAAS, ICA, and even MUIS. We were all working very closely together to make sure that those who needed help, we were able to extend help to them, and also the flights were able to come back smoothly.
It sounds like a very complex operation involving so many, on the ground and also here in Singapore. What were some of the biggest challenges that were faced, especially given how, as you say, dynamic the situation is?
Right, I would say the security situation on the ground was very fluid. In fact, one of our officers actually personally saw a rocket landing near him, and there was smoke, rising from the ground. That's how close to the action our officers were. And the security situation certainly injected a lot of uncertainty. But thankfully, our team on the ground, actually, they were very resourceful. And the Singaporeans who came on the repatriation were very calm and cooperative. I thought it brought out the best of Singaporeans during a crisis.
Yeah, definitely. And also, given that the situation remains quite fluid at this point, can we expect more repatriation flights to be on the cards?
Yeah, we will monitor the situation closely. In the meantime, we know that some airports and commercial airlines have resumed operations gradually. So if there are Singaporeans who wish to come back, please contact MFA and we will give you advice on the options that are available.
Now, talking about support, despite repatriation flights, apart from that, what other actions will MFA take, or is it able to take, to help support Singaporeans currently in that region?
Well, the travel advisory that we've issued still stands. So Singaporeans should defer or travel to the region during this period. And for those who are there, we will keep in close contact with them and provide them with timely information and advice. Yes.
And also for the Singaporeans who choose to remain there, is there any advice or anything that you would say in terms of points of time where they might have to come back to Singapore, or anything on that front?
Well, I would say the situation remains very fluid. We hope that Singaporeans who are still in the region keep in close contact with MFA and also with their families and friends, so that the families back here in Singapore know that they are safe. And where we have information, we will provide them to the Singaporeans who are still in Middle East. Yeah.
Now, on a personal level, when you witness the videos of a lot of Singaporeans coming back, how do you feel about that? And also, what do you think this really brings out in not just Singaporeans, but also, the other foreigners that were just featured in that story as well, who came back? What are your thoughts on that?
I feel very proud as a Singaporean. I was also from the Air Force before, so when I saw the repatriation flights coming back to Singapore, landing safely, and Singaporeans touching down on the ground, hugging their families and friends, I felt it was a very touching moment. Reminded me that Singaporeans do have the courage and the gumption, and that we do work together to take care of one another.
Yeah.
In times of crisis, actually, I think the best part of Singaporeans will come out.
Yes, yes. And that sentiment is very much echoed, I think, in a lot of the responses you get online, or also people who've just returned to Singapore. Also, I guess one of the things that were brought up that was quite interesting was that some of the first passengers who landed in Singapore, they were surprised that the plane, which is an MRTT, was actually designed very much like a commercial flight. So many people are surprised by that. Why was that, and how would you kind of explain that to us?
The MRTT is a multi-role tanker transport. Actually, it's configurable. Normally in peacetime, it's used for training, air-to-air refueling between the tanker aircraft and the fighter jets. But it can also be reconfigured for troop ferry, and in this case, the seats could be installed very fast to turn it into a passenger ferry. Yeah, so very flexible, and also in this case, definitely revealing of how responsive Singapore is to a lot of these crises as well. So MOS, thank you so much for coming in today and sharing all of this with us. I've been chatting with the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Gan Siow Huang.